Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Golfing Greenkeeper podcast. My name is Steve Smith, and I'm your host. And look, I know it has been a while since the last episode, which was way back in January, but if you've been on my socials, you know that our little young fella, Carter, has been up and down with some health things, and we've been in and out of hospital a little bit. It's been a pretty full-on time for us as a family, and as such, the podcast is at the moment been few and far between. So I do apologise in that instance, but obviously family will come first, but I've got a treat for you. This is one that I've recorded. I have been sitting on it for a little while just so I could get the time to put it all together. It is a welcome back to the segment of the podcast called Keeper of the Greens. You're going to love this one, so make sure you sit back, relax, get a drink, come and enjoy it with me. This is episode number 78. Ladies and gentlemen, I am really excited. It's 2023, and we're just going to go straight down to Melbourne, straight into the wonderful Sandbelt region that is down there in Victoria on the outskirts southeast of Melbourne, and I'm going straight to the top of the tree with this one. We're going into Metropolitan Golf Club. I have on the line Superintendent John Mann. G'day, John. Happy New Year, mate.
Same to you, Steve, and thank you very much for the invite. It's good to be on.
Mate, thank you so much for being part of this. And look, I'm not going to edit this out. I just ballsed it up altogether, and I forgot to press record, mate. So I do apologise. The listeners, you won't hear what we just did, and we did do it. We've already been through some bits and pieces here, but we've had to start again because I'm a complete novice for the start of the year, and we've gone to record. But, mate, look, we're going to start off with Steve's Super 7 questions, right? Before we get stuck into this, I'm really excited to have you on, for one, and we're going to dive into a lot of bits and pieces here about Metro and the like. Looking forward to it. But Steve, Super 7, are you ready to go?
Let's go.
Number one, a familiar one. There's a few rejig questions here, but number one, sunrise or sunset?
Sunrise every day of the week.
Every day. Number two, dogs or no dogs allowed on a golf course, and this is a personal preference thing.
I love dogs. I have my own dog who ventures out there as well. So, yeah,
wonderful.
Dogs.
Great stuff. Great. I'm actually finding so many people love dogs on a golf course. So this is really interesting. Number three, another familiar one, stripes or no stripes on fairways. And I know that Metropolitan's had a bit of an interesting history with both of these types. So I'm curious to know what your thoughts are, mate.
I'm a no stripes man, and I think we'll touch on a little bit of that later on.
We will indeed. We will indeed. Number four, green-coloured sand or natural-coloured sand to repair divots with. Now, this is a new one.
I've been involved with both, and I'm going to go with natural coloured sand.
Natural coloured. Very good. Number five, your favourite grass variety, mate. What are your thoughts there?
Fine fescue for me. The number one grass type for golf. It's fantastic grass in the right situation and the right environment.
Of course. Sensational. Number six. Now, this one's a new one and slightly interested to hear about this, and I hope this comes across right. But I want to know your preferred style of golf course, and it's a multiple choice between what I think are three of the best, or three of fantastic golf courses in Australia. So I'm curious to know your favourite preferred style of golf course. Is it Cape Wickham on King Island on the coast on the seaside edges? Is it Kingston Heath down there, a neighbouring course? I couldn't put Metro in, mate, so because I knew you'd be biased about that. So is it Kingston Heath or is it Elliston up in country regional New South Wales with the beautiful rolling hills and the wonderful and the Upper Hunter region? What are your thoughts there?
I'm a links fan myself, so I'll have to go with Cape Wickham, even though it's an Australian links. So I'm a bit of a traditionalist, so links golf for me.
There you go, very good. And number seven, another slightly rejigged one here, and this could be interesting throughout the interviews that I do. If you could visit any golf course in Australia, not necessarily play, if you could visit any golf course in Australia tomorrow, which one would it be? And I've brought this down to Australia only because I want to hear what greenkeepers and supers in Australia want to visit in this country, because I found it was going to some similar ones around the world, which I think were all pretty popular and pretty high on people's lists. So in Australia, mate, anywhere tomorrow, which one?
So does that mean is that a golf course that I haven't been to before, Steve?
No, look, it can be, I guess. If I turned up to your door, knocked on the shed, mate, and I said to you, John, tomorrow Well, I'm going to fly you anywhere in this country. Where do you want to go and visit? Which golf course?
Drive me to Blackrock, Royal Melbourne.
Bah.
But I've spent it. I've
There you
played
go.
there before. So if I have to try and find one that I haven't been to before, I'm a bit of a quirky cat when it comes to golf courses. So
Nice.
I'm
I like
going
quirk.
to say, yeah, so do I. I love the
Quirk.
Lonsdale, the new revamped Lonsdale. I love that sort of style of golf course. So I'm going to say golf courses I haven't been to, Healesville.
Healesville. Okay, that's regional Victoria.
It is, yeah. I mean, I've heard some really good reports. They've got some short, fun holes. They've got creeks running around through the place. So I was talking to somebody about that the other day who had been there, and that was on my list of quirky little golf courses that I'd like to visit.
Lovely.
So,
Very good. This is what we like to hear. So we've got Blackrock as one at Royal Melbourne, and we've also got Healesville. I like that. That's a great answer. I'll let you claim 2. Even though it's the first one, I'm going to tighten it now. For anyone who don't think you're going to get 2 out of me, you're only getting 1. So John's already started off with 2. Mate, thank you very much. Wonderful answers for Steve Super 7. Now, let's get into the meat of this conversation, mate. Let's get stuck into a little bit about you, a little bit how you got to where you are. You're at Metro, Superintendent. We've mentioned that. And let's get talking a little bit about what's involved in a place like Metropolitan. So let's start off with, mate, how long have you been at Metropolitan as Superintendent now? It hasn't been long, I know that. How long have you been there?
I started in May of last year now, so that's 7 months. So still relatively new and certainly still learning Metropolitan.
Sure, absolutely. And it's a nice little learning period into the cooler time through winter, no doubt, and then you really step it up and take the reins and get stuck into it, sink your teeth into it, I imagine, for the last sort of few months now.
Absolutely. It's a nice time to start in May. The summer stresses are out of the place, so you can spend a bit of time learning the way the golf course operates, learning the way the staff operate, and then hit the growing season, hit the ground running, I suppose. I think somebody, an older superintendent, more experienced superintendent told me that the first year you're very reactive, and it probably takes you 2 years on your site to have seen each season a couple of times to really be comfortable or more comfortable with what's happening. So
that's probably fair assessment. A fair assessment. I think you've got to. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I don't think you can get a feel for a golf course unless you've experienced it for a little while, and I don't mean a few months. Exactly that. A couple of seasons, a couple of each of the seasons, a couple of times to really get a feel for things and understand what it does, how it works, how it breathes. It's golf courses are wonderful places. So, mate. That's it since May last year. So can you tell us a bit about your background, what steps you've got to get to Metropolitan? Because you don't just turn up and go, look, I'm going to stick my hand up. I'm going to go and train to be a greenkeeper and, okay, tick that box. Metro, I'm it. I'm going to be superintendent. Mate, how do you get to a place like Metropolitan? What was your path?
I grew up in the UK, so I was a cricketer and loved sports and managed to, in the school holidays and whenever I had some free time, I was involved in helping out at a multi-purpose sports facility. So 2 cricket pitches, 2 soccer pitches, 2 rugby pitches, and 4 lawn tennis courts.
Okay.
And that gave me a fair bit of exposure across the board. And then I came out to Australia and moved to Northern Victoria, where I played cricket and also worked at a golf course in Tatura, Hilltop. There, and I did 3 seasons there, and helped with some construction work there as well as some operational stuff. And then moved down to Melbourne. I was as a casual employee at Royal Melbourne on the course staff there, and managed to, as a position came available on the staff full time, which I was fortunate enough to obtain. And then assistant superintendent at Royal Melbourne, and I was fortunate enough to take a course superintendent's job at Woodlands, which is a wonderful little golf course. I say little because it is a slightly smaller scale than Royal Melbourne, certainly. And then I was there for 4 years, and then an opportunity came up at Commonwealth Golf Club. So I moved to Commonwealth, and I was there for just shy of 4 years at Commonwealth, and the opportunity came up at Metropolitan, and here I am. So I'm very, very fortunate to have been involved in so many wonderful clubs.
Now, I did take note. I did take note that you mentioned back there, mate, that you jagged a couple of positions, and you scored a job here, and that doesn't happen by chance. You're downplaying. I'm going to say that you're downplaying your role and how you've been perceived by others, and your work ethic, and clearly to take the position on as first time superintendent there at Woodlands. I mean, these things don't happen unless you're very good at what you do. So I'm putting you in the category of very good at what you do, mate. Whether you look at it that way or not, that's where it is. That's the status to be at a position in a place like that. So you've got Woodlands, you've done time at Royal, Regional Victoria, Royal Melbourne, worked your way up to assistant, bang, super at Woodlands, bang, super at Commonwealth, bang, super at Metro. I mean, these are pretty awesome steps along the way. And to have held the superintendent's position, albeit briefly so far at Metro and in the earliest time that you've got already under your belt there, how, from the outside, the sandbelt is a sandbelt, right? We just go, well, they're all pretty similar. Unless you've visited, and I've only been doing that over the last few years, unless you've been able to go down there and see each course to understand the nuances, can you describe some of those nuances? Because some people are going to sit there and go, oh, they're all the same. I imagine they're not too different. What types of differences are there between a Woodlands, a Commonwealth, and a Metro, for example, and a Royal?
There's lots of similarities and there's lots of differences, I suppose. Probably the best way to explain it. The style of bunkering, absolutely, is a similar characteristic, but probably on different scales. I mean, I look at a site like Woodlands, for example. Everything's on a slightly smaller scale. It's a little bit more narrow, relatively to the other courses, more tree lined, in particular, with really small greens that are flat. Commonwealth, probably a scale up again in terms of its size, slightly larger greens, but still on the small side, but severely tilted and really quirky. When I say tilted, I mean towards the preferred angle of play, but also tilted from a slope perspective. And then Metropolitan is probably a larger scale again, more sweeping, sort of larger greens. The bunker size is slightly larger as well, and then Royal Melbourne, I mean, nowhere does scale and grandeur and size and royalty as Royal Melbourne. I mean, that place is just phenomenal. It has that in spades. So if there's a bit of a scale there, a sliding scale, Royal Melbourne certainly does that the best, I think, in terms of scale. But it has so much more room.
It's big.
So much more space out there. It is huge, isn't it?
It's big. It really. I mean, it's and again, like I said, until I visited, I just grouped them all similar. Like you know, there's clubs. A lot of you guys border each other. You're next door to Huntingdale, and Royals next door to Vic, and there's lots of boundary sharing, but they do have these nuances, like you said. Royal Melbourne, it's grand. I like that word you said, grandeur. I think that's the best word to describe a Royal and Metro. Look, mate, I'm just going to throw it out there because you were kind enough to take me around when I was down there in October last year, and I got a chance to see Metro in, I'm going to say, somewhat typical Melbourne light.
Yes, yeah, definitely typically Melbourne spring weather. Absolutely.
It was cold, it was miserable, it was wet, and it was probably appropriate. But I'm going to say, if Royal Melbourne is grand on in its scale, and I don't know if this is right, and I'm just throwing it out there while I'm thinking. I'm going to call Metro sexy. That's what I'm going to call Metro. I just think, and I don't know if you agree with me on that, or what, I don't even know if it's appropriate. And apologies to anyone who might find that inappropriate, but I just think it is. It's you get there. The clubhouse is just super cool. It's a SMIC clubhouse, but when you go out the other side of the clubhouse and you look at the carpet, the beautifully manicured, prepared turf surfaces that just it's velvet. It's like staring at a billiard table. And it's sexy. I don't know. That's just what I feel. So I'm just throwing it out there, mate. I probably should stop. I got no other way of describing it. But there you go. I'm putting it in the sexy category. I think it is that good. So they're the nuances, they're the differences, and you talked about scale and things, mate. Let's start, I suppose, a little bit. I want to hear about the grass types that make up Metropolitan. Can you tell us listeners, people who have visited the course, greenkeepers, golfers who have played it, members who live there, people who have Metro at their bucket list to go and play one day before they die. Tell us a little bit about what makes up the playing surfaces of Metropolitan Golf Club.
So we're predominantly couch grass, tees, surrounds, and fairways. So that's a wintergreen couch, with the exception of a handful of, 2 or 3 holes out in the back 9, which are Santa Ana. We have some Santa Ana tees and Santa Ana surrounds, and a few patches on other holes here and there that are Santa Ana where new work has been completed. But predominantly wintergreen with some Santa Ana out there. And generally at this time of year, you don't notice the difference between the two grass types. You do that a little bit more on the shoulder periods when environmental conditions are a little bit different as they are now. But couch at this time of year, it all looks pretty similar. And then we have bent grass greens. So we have SR, Seed Research of Oregon varieties, 1019 and 1020. So they're a couple of probably older bent grasses now from probably developed in the 70s and released in the 90s. So, I mean, there's been a few generations of bent grasses since then, but they're relatively old bent grasses on the greens.
Yep, compared to, and let's just throw it out there because it was on television not long ago, which was Victoria Golf Club, and they've just got all brand new pure distinction greens, and you can look at the two even just in colour and see quite the differences. But in terms of maintenance, they are quite different in that the ones you've got there at Metro are old, like you say in inverted commas, an older variety.
They are, absolutely. I mean, pure distinction's quite it's a new grass, so it's a different generation. It's quite an aggressive growth, lots of really fine, dense turf. The older bent grasses generally tend to be a little bit more coarse, and there's 30 years difference between the maturity of those bent grasses at Victoria and the ones that we see here. And what happens is those bent grass varieties, even though there's just 2 varieties blended together, they start to separate out back to their parentage. So a bent grass, without getting too technical, bent grasses, reproduce sexually, and each seed is genetically different to another one.
See, it is sexy. I told you it was sexy.
We managed to both get that word in there. Over a 30-year period, the segregation happens, and the difference between those, the genetic difference between those individual seeds becomes more apparent. So we end up with quite a patchwork quilt type appearance here, which I really enjoy. It makes it feel like a natural old traditional golf surface for me, and no doubt that pure distinction will do that over a period of time as well. It won't stay quite as uniform as it appears now. Over a period of time, it will segregate. That's unavoidable when you're managing bent grasses. But certainly 2 different generations, 2 different styles, and 2 different maintenance practices as well required for each of them. Very
much so. But I like that. We'll talk about that you just broke down then, how they sort of revert back is probably a simplistic way of looking at it, back to their original types and original parentage, and you start to see them separate. You really did point this out to me, and my experience is mostly with Poa greens, bent blends, but majority in the highlands and the tablelands of New South Wales, just west of Sydney and the Blue Mountains, it's majority Poa. We're talking 80 to 90% plus Poa and bits of bent scattered through there. You showed me in detail, you got down, we're on, I don't know the green, so forgive me for just saying a green, at Metro in my wonderful Melbourne tempered visit.
You were crouching down to get out of the window.
Possibly. I was hoping to hide from the rain, but that wasn't going to happen either. But you pointed out some of those parts that you can see quite clearly. Like if you're standing back, you can see it in a broad sense, but to sit there and point it out specifically what you were showing me and the differences, some of the colour starts to break down a little bit. It goes from being green to being like almost an offy green with different tinges through those older parentage breakaways of the grass varieties, and then and it was this, like you said, it's a mottled patchwork. And the only other time I've heard a super mention that to me was Superintendent Nathan Bennett at Royal Adelaide, where they've got a 4 different bent grass varieties on their green. So it really does bring that earthiness and that naturalistic feel to the surface, doesn't it? That's really something that you have there that is part of the experience, part of the look, part of the feel as well.
Absolutely. I mean, the Sandbelt is synonymous with, it's a traditional golfing area. So, and it's synonymous with firm and probably more aligned with the types of the style of presentation and maintenance from the UK as opposed to an American style.
Yep.
So, if you go to the links courses in the UK, they have mottled appearances, and so we probably lend ourselves a little bit more to that style of maintenance than the American sort of mono stand, quite uniform appearance. So I think it suits the cap fits in that regard.
Yeah, sure.
So it gives us that earthy style of presentation that we're looking for. I think that's a rabbit hole. Not a rabbit hole, but it's a huge discussion, that, isn't it, in terms of presentation styles and your sustainability there. And
mate, there's a lot. There is a lot, and I will jump in because I was going to mention, and I'll add to that, and I just mentioned POA in terms of control and presentation of a golf course. You've got that. Does that, what you have there, and not wanting a monoculture of one particular bent variety only, and keeping it that earthy, very naturalistic feel and look about it, aesthetic to the golf course, is there less maintenance required in that? Could you go around and say, look, we're going to strip them as a club, we want to strip them, we want to have one grass variety, we're going to go with a pure distinction or whatever it might be, 777, Mackenzie, it doesn't matter, and we're going to have one variety because that's all we want to have, and we're going to be hardlined about it. Is there less tension, less maintenance, less involved in having what you have that's from the, you mentioned from the sort of 70s to 90s, the naturalistic look, a feel about it? It all fit. I don't know how to describe it in words for the podcast. When I was there and walking those fairways with you and we're walking around the greens, it fits the colour tones of the landscape and broad, the wallpaper that is the tree colours of the eucalyptus stands that are around the course, and the shrub colours, and it all matches, and the sand colours as well, of course. So the sand of the sandbelt, they're all earthy tones. It all fits. There's none of this glowing green, and I'm just going to put it out that way, and I'm not being detrimental to anyone else, but it all fits so comfortably snug in a picture.
It does. I mean, texture adds interest, doesn't it? If you've got a uniform, mono stand of turf that looks exactly the same colour, exactly the same texture, it lacks interest. So I think to the eye, it's appealing, that style of presentation. I think generally the less fertiliser and the less water you use, you discourage POA.
Yes.
So that's a side benefit to that as well, and deliberate ploy.
Yep.
To use as little amount of fertiliser as you possibly can, as little amount of water, and then you get that. You generally get a browner appearance or an off-colour appearance more than you get that green appearance. Really, for me, you should only fertilise and you should only water to improve the quality of your turf, not improve the colour of the turf. I mean, a turf stand should be judged on its quality, not on its colour. Oh,
I like that. I'm going to use that. I'm going to write that down.
So, you should never water or fertilise in my opinion, and this is on the sandbelt.
Sure.
You should never water or fertilise a turf stand on a golf course on the sandbelt for colour, in my opinion. It's a natural. We're in a natural environment. There was a comment from Peter Thompson about sandbelt courses, and he said he lamented the fact that he didn't know what season it was when he arrived at a golf course, and that's always stuck with me a little bit.
Yeah.
You want to see some brown turf when you're there in summer. And when I say brown turf, I don't mean sparse turf and dead turf. I mean browned off turf. And he said he lamented the fact he didn't know what season it was, and that kind of stuck with me. And the earthy tones, they had a visual appeal to me, and beauty's in the eye of the beholder here, isn't
sure.
it? I think as well. But generally, the turf that's off colour generally plays the best. And as superintendents, we're managing, we're juggling these balls of, plant health, playability, and aesthetics, I think. And they're all in the air at the same time. And you're making decisions, based on each of those considerations. So, but for me, generally, the turf plays better when it's brown. I'm not here to prepare turf that looks particularly pretty. I'm here to prepare turf to play the way that it wants to play. And I think part of that comes from where, you're a product of your environment. And I spent a lot of time at Royal Melbourne, and that's the way Royal Melbourne is managed generally and has been for a long period of time. And I think there's no doubt that rubs off on you, and then that becomes your style of presentation, a more natural appearance, a more browned off appearance, certainly in the greens area. So, but you need to have robustness and maturity in your turf, and the right turfs to be able to present those type of conditions as well. So it's not, I'd hate to see browned off Poa greens in Melbourne in January, because that's probably not a good spot to be in. But browned off bent grass, that's a little bit off colour is, it probably works pretty well. So, we're trying to present a more natural looking landscape and golf course turf, and less artificial, I think, is probably the aim of the game. And as a byproduct, like I said, you control Poa, or don't control Poa, sorry, but you deter Poa. There's less water inputs, there's less fertilizer inputs there. So that's my philosophy, I suppose, generally.
In a nutshell, mate, let's. I'm just going to write all that down and mail it out to every golf club in the country. There you go.
It's not a cookie cutter approach.
You know what? And it isn't. You're right. I'm glad you qualified it with that comment, because that's very important to understand, isn't it? That. And I say this to a lot of people, that you can't transplant the ideals and the maintenance practices of one golf course, and let's just use Metro because we're talking about it, and plant that at Royal Sydney in Sydney. It doesn't work. And likewise, and I love to say this, if you get 10 superintendents and they're all asked to write a program for maintenance at Metropolitan, you'll come up with 10 different ideas to achieve the same result usually, and that is a pleasurable, playable golf course. But there's so many different ways of achieving those goals, and at the end of the day, I suppose understanding what the goal is to be achieved is also very important. And I think a lot of clubs out there, places like Metro and Royal Melbourne, Royal Sydney's, and all those sorts of upper echelon courses probably understand their goal. And I find a lot of the smaller clubs don't understand their goal. And that's probably where a lot of problems arise too for smaller clubs, is they don't know exactly how they want to present their golf course. So understanding how, you've just narrated very well and quite clearly what the goal is for presentation at Metropolitan and what you're trying to achieve. And then you go about the steps to do so. I think there's a lot of clubs out there that don't know that. And I think that's, like I said, I'll reiterate, where there's a lot of problems lie in the path to get to wherever they're trying to get to. So, mate, very, very appreciative of the way you've broken that down, because it says a lot about how the golf course plays for players as well, and what they see when they get out there.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, like I said, we're trying to generally on the Sandbelt, we're trying to present firm and fast turf whenever we can, and that's the conditions that have been synonymous with that. So that's what we're trying to produce here.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Mate, I'm going to ask you, and another one that you showed me that I want to talk about if we can and break it down for people, is those two cooch varieties you mentioned that you have on the golf course, particularly on the fairways, is wintergreen and Santana cooch. And everyone knows that I'm a massive fan of Santa, and I won't shy away from that. Yep. But you've thrown a spanner in the middle of my forehead when I saw the fairways of Metropolitan. You literally lined me up. You saw me coming, and you said, "Here you go, Steve. What do you think of this?" And the wintergreen portions of your fairways, the majority of your fairways,
yep.
are, I go back to the word of sexy, like your bunkers, like your greens. It's just sexy. Metro. It was really interesting for me to see wintergreen at that level of presentation, and the differences between that. You could see the line if you knew what you were looking for, and you did point it out, and you could see the line of where some of those new sections of Santa Ana Cooch lay. Not that it was obvious, but it was there, and I could pick it up, I suppose, being a trained eye. But tell us a little bit about what that means. Is there's disease that hits, short version, that hits the wintergreen that doesn't hit the Santa Ana down there, that you have some of the some issues with from time to time, like we do have diseases on golf courses in grass varieties. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the challenges there between maintaining the incredibly beautiful wintergreen and some of those difficulties that lie therein at Metro?
I'll start answering that question that probably in a more general fashion, is that there's no silver bullet grass there's no silver bullet in our industry in general. So there's not one grass to say this is the best grass, go with it, you won't have any problems.
Yep.
It's generally what fits best for what you're trying to prepare, and if you've got a grass, it's up to the turf manager to learn how to manage it at its best. So I'll probably catch all that question at the start with
No, that's good.
They're both great grass types, and I've never managed wintergreen fairways before until I came here, and I haven't really for a long period of time. But managed Santa Ana and Legend Cooch at Royal Melbourne and Commonwealth, and then Woodlands as well. So I was certainly on the same bandwagon as you, Steve, as a Santa Ana fan. But then a little bit like you, I came to Metropolitan like, hey, these wintergreen fairways are phenomenal. And when the wintergreen's good, it is. And the Santa Ana's good, I think the wintergreen's better. As I mentioned, there's pros and cons with everything. There's pros and cons with different soil types. There's pros and cons with different grass types. And, I think Santa Ana produces a little bit more seed head than wintergreen might in the spring period in Melbourne. So that's probably a negative for Santa Ana. I think wintergreen is a little bit more susceptible to disease. Certainly BF1 that we're struggling with in Melbourne a little, and Sydney they have done as well. So wintergreen seems to be a little bit more predisposed to BF1 and leaf diseases as well. But I mean, when they're both going great, they're both ripping grass types. And if you had those in Melbourne, you're going to be pretty happy either way, I think. But there's some minor differences between the two. But for me at Metropolitan, the wintergreen here is pretty special. It's pretty special when it's going. So, and I've had to eat my words as well a little bit there to a few of my industry peers that have told me how good wintergreen is, and I said, don't shut up. You can't get any better than Santa Ana. And when the wintergreen's going, I think you can. But hey, you can throw a blanket across them. They're both great grass types. I think both great.
Mate, very, very well sat on the fence. Well done.
Well, I said wintergreen when they're both going.
No, mate, look, in jest, mate, in jest. It's yeah, I was really surprised, like you just mentioned, that you had been. I didn't realise that you could get anything that level of quality. So side by side, I will say it, because I'm not working on anything. I will say that side by side at their best, wintergreen is better, and I didn't think I would ever say that. But likewise, both have their challenges. And talk about thatch accumulation and the material that you need to manage a little bit more. I think with Santa Ana, because it can get quite dense. It's very prolific in its growth habit. There's some of its attributes, but equally, that means you've got to probably work it a little bit more sometimes as well to get the best out of it.
Absolutely, and there's a colour difference there as well. Certainly, the Santa Ana seems to have a darker, more dense green, I suppose.
Yep.
Whereas wintergreen sits a little bit more off colour, which I think suits the more natural type of appearance as well that we're trying to present the golf course in that fashion. So I think it suits well there. Bit of a herbicide tolerance difference as well.
Okay.
I think the wintergreen generally handles herbicides, both post and pre-emergent, a little bit better than Santa Ana does as well. But
there you go.
Hey, look, I think we're we're splitting hairs a little bit as well.
I was going to say we're the finest of hairs. I might add.
I think so.
No, mate, very good. It's good to understand that, because as a player, we get down there and some people might notice, some people might not. There's going to be people that are members of the club that might notice, there's some that might not. At the end of the day, like you said, you're preparing them all very, very well, extremely well. I might add. I'm cutting you short there. Extremely well to play off. You get. Are we splitting hairs even describing any challenges, really, to be fair? Because it's delivered at such a quality level between you and the team to deliver that quality of golf course presentation and playability between those two grasses. If I'm being honest, most people are going to walk across them and go, holy shit, these are incredibly sexy. And that's all. They just put it in the sexy category and they move on. They play golf and they go, now that was an experience. I've ticked my bucket list and I move on. That's I think that's where it would probably be at, if I'm being honest, for most players. But mate, could you tell us a little bit about moving on from the grass type specifically? And I know I haven't talked about bunkers yet, but and we may or may not. But I'm curious as to some of the beautiful site characteristics of Metro. How would you describe what makes Metro unique from a playing perspective?
You've mentioned the bunkers, and they've been across social media and different formats. The bunkers, I mean, clearly they're very stark and very dramatic looking.
Clearly they're shit hot.
They're pretty cool. They're pretty cool. There's a fair bit of maintenance involved in them. Keeping them stable. We mow up putting surfaces all the way to the bunker edges as well. So again, they need to be stable to be able to hold mowers and also people doing that. So there's a bit of maintenance involved in that, but it's a real Metropolitan look and a sandbelt look to a certain degree. But I think Metropolitan probably does that the most sharply and the most dramatically. So that's certainly a Metropolitan characteristic.
Yep.
We're a relatively flat site, but again, I spoke about how you need to be at a site for a long period of time to appreciate it. I'm only just starting to appreciate Metropolitan now, and particularly with Metro being quite flat, there's lots of quirks and subtleties. The characteristics are quite subtle. We've got some humps and bumps and that are sort of hidden generally. You don't take much notice of them, but the more time you spend out there, they start to become really apparent to you. And for a flat site, we've got a lot of interesting humps and bumps and quirks, and which are really cool. I mentioned I'm a bit of a quirky cat when it comes to golf courses, so I enjoy that side of things.
I think I'll just jump in because I think quirk makes I haven't done this yet, and I'm probably letting the cat out of the bag a little bit, but I love talking about quirks on golf courses, and it doesn't matter whether it's in the play of the golf course or if it's in the landscape the golf course is on. Quirk, I think, makes an experience, a memorable experience of a golf course. You've mentioned it a couple of times. You like that. I love it, and I want to talk more about it in the future. But there was I don't remember the hole, mate. You showed me some of these really large humps in the fairway on one of the golf holes that was really stood out. That I don't even know if I'm throwing you in the deep end by not even me knowing where it was. I don't know if you can think of it.
I know what you mean. It's on the ninth fairway, on the inside of the dog leg on the ninth fairway.
Yeah, that one. It was on the ninth. Yeah. These amazing little humps that mate, they're quirk. It's out of characteristic in a sense. It's not part of a common theme. And you're like, wow, what is this doing here? And it plays. It's going to play with the golf ball. It's going to do quirky things, right?
Plays with the iron, plays with the golf ball, doesn't it?
Sure.
I spoke about how earthy tones and texture creates, visual interest, and I think humps and bumps and hollows and quirks do that as well. Metropolitan's got a lot of that, and the more time I spend here, the more I appreciate that. And that's with every golf course. I think generally the more time you spend there, the more you become familiar with its quirks and its nuances, and you spot things like, hey, been here for a year, how did I not even spot that over there? So, it takes a while to fully understand and appreciate a property, both agronomically and also architecturally, I think.
Unreal.
So, but Metro's, a very quirky, cool little place.
Now, I want to hear from you a little bit of a personal preference here. Do you have if someone gets the opportunity to play the golf course, their bucket list tick, or if it's a member who plays it regularly, from your perspective, and I say this about greenkeepers, you live there, you play there, you breathe it, you know it, you feel it, you taste the golf course, maybe not literally, but you know it so intimately well. Is there somewhere on the course, and this is one of my favourite things to understand or hear about, that is just a spot on the golf course you go, you know what, this is what defines, or not defines, but this is what Metro is about? Is there somewhere, is it a view, a location, a feeling, a green, a shot type potentially that is just quintessentially Metropolitan? Is there somewhere on the golf course you go, you know what, if someone comes here, this is the spot they need to experience to know this is Metropolitan?
Metropolitan's has changed a little bit during its history. There was some compulsory acquisition of 3 holes in the 1950s. So we have an original set of holes, and then we have some holes that were amended following that compulsory acquisition. So for me, the quintessentially Metropolitan holes, particularly you can stand between the 3rd and 4th fairways, and you can see the 5th, the 3rd, the 4th. You can see a number of those quirks and humps and bumps that that we spoke of just before. Yep. So for me, between the 3rd and 4th holes there, you can see the bunkering on the 2nd as well. If you're in the right spot, you can see back up the 1st. So that for me, the vista there across the original, some of the original holes between the 3rd and 4th fairways is my favourite spot, and the corner of 9th as well that we spoke about as well. It's another great spot there. But between 3 and 4, those original holes for me.
Nice.
My favourite spot.
That's cool. I'll endeavour to try and get down there one day when it's not in Melbourne weather, and potentially experience. What's that? Sorry.
We've got a wonderful spell of weather at the moment, relatively stable for Melbourne. We're in a sort of period of high 20s, low 30s for a good week or so. So perfect
nice.
Golfing.
Very, very nice. Yeah. Look, every now and then it's like, if you get to experience a golf course, I've been lucky enough to play New South Wales twice, about 25 years apart, New South Wales Golf Club, and both times was no wind. So most people tell me that you go to New South Wales Golf Club and it's windy. But if you get to a Metropolitan, for example, and it's, like you said, just beautiful weather, and you get to take it all in. Take it all in, people. Melbourne's weather's fickle.
Golf courses always look better in the sunshine, Steve. You get far more people telling you the golf course looks great when the sun's out than when the sun's in. So there's something about that.
Yeah, well, that's true. I mean, and you know what? Like I talk about how bad the weather was when I visited there a few months ago, right? But it's still Metropolitan. Like if you get an opportunity, I say this to people playing golf, if you get an opportunity as a guest of a member, or it might be another reason that you get a chance to play at Metropolitan, it doesn't matter whether it's 7 degrees and it's drizzly or if it's a beautiful 25 degrees. It's Metropolitan. The sexiness is going to come out. I'm throwing that out there all the time, right? It is Metropolitan, and it has its stand in Australian golf culture because of what it is. So I don't think I'm pumping it up too much, mate. I don't want to put too much pressure on you to deliver a product, but I really found, I should say, that it exceeded what I was expecting when I walked in. I didn't know what to expect, and I could literally count on one hand the number of golf courses that have blown me away from my level of expectation. And Metro was just... It was incredible. It really was fantastic, mate, and hats off, because I'm blown away by what gets delivered there and what you guys are doing. It is fantastic. Absolutely. I'll keep saying it. Mate, another question I've got, and it probably touches on a little bit before. I was down for the Power Forum. We talked about power control. You've briefly mentioned there some of the cultural practices in the way that you maintain the greens for power control. And I don't want to put anyone on the spot here, but how does power control sit with you? I suppose in a way, is it? I've had some interesting. I'm just going to throw it out there like this instead. I've had some interesting conversations on social media in the last few months about power control, particularly in Melbourne, and not from greenkeepers, from players, people that are members of golf clubs and the like. And the stance in Melbourne, and maybe I'm stereotyping, but that's okay. The stance in Melbourne from the loudest voices that were talking to me was one of absolutes, that POA should not be on a golf green. And I'm not saying that you're going to let it in or not, but how does your maintenance go with concern for POA in Melbourne? Because it's a pretty challenging thing down there that I didn't realise.
It is. I mean, we have some, you've touched upon, we have some pretty awful weather in Melbourne for a decent chunk of the year. So conditions are favourable to, for POA germination and also establishment and survival. So, and we do struggle with that in Melbourne a little bit. I mean, if you take every decision that, if you're managing a bent grass putting surfaces like we are here, pretty much every decision that you make, whether it's to fertilise, whether it's to water, you've always got POA in the back of your mind. So, do I want to water tonight? Oh, well, I'm going to grow a bit of POA. Well, why don't we just hand water and we'll keep them drier and leaner? Do we need to fertilise them? No, we don't. We've got really good density in our turf. So if we fertilise, we're just going to grow more grass and probably grow some POA. So from a decision-making perspective, you've always got that as a consideration. And the reason, certainly in a putting surface, that you try and keep POA out is because it's hard to manage two grass types that are completely different, that grow at different rates at different times of year, have different textures, and that to get a smooth putting surface and a really, ultimately with a putting surface, you're trying to get it firm and smooth. They're the two main objectives.
Yep.
So if you've got two grasses that, grow at different rates at different times of year, that makes that really challenging. So from a playability perspective, you want to keep POA bent grass greens because you get the smoothest and best ball roll. That's, I suppose, that's where the root of that desire comes from.
Yep.
In fairways, well, if you're managing bent grass greens, if you've got a lot of POA in your fairways and your surrounds, well, as we know, POA is a prolific seeder and it's going to find its way into your putting surfaces. So if we could, so that drives that control of POA for me in the surroundings, in the surrounds, in the fairways, in the tees, because I don't want it anywhere near my greens. And I don't want it to be able to infiltrate into the greens and affect the quality of the putting surface. So that's where the driver comes from for me. Remembering that 15 years ago, Royal Melbourne had a two-grass policy on its fairways, and they used to allow POA to come through in the winter and used to mow it, and it provided a really, really good surface. And then you don't water. If we have a dry spring and you don't water your fairways, the POA will transition out and the couch grass takes over. So, so you can still get really good POA couch fairways as well. So I don't think it really necessarily affects the fairway surface per se. But if you have it in your green, that's when it really can affect playability for me, and that's where the driver comes from, controlling it across the whole property, I suppose. So if you put aesthetics aside, it's really driven from a place of trying to keep the smoothest surface we possibly can on our greens. And to do that, we need to control POA across the whole property. I'm sure that a lot of people are aware that we have herbicide resistance issues. And you heard quite a lot about that, Steve, at the POA Forum at Woodlands. So we have major problems with herbicide resistance, where chemicals that have historically been able to control POA, both pre and post emergent, no longer work. So I think as an industry, both managing turf and also from a golfer's perspective, we need to manage our expectations as such to realise that a completely POA-free environment, whilst we'll strive to achieve that, is probably not always going to be achievable, given the current set of circumstances, Melbourne's climate, herbicide resistance issues, and every to be able to apply these herbicides, they're not cheap. So every golf course has got a budget, and every and you have to work with those budgets. And if it's not achievable, you can still have great surfaces when you've got POA intermingled through them.
Mate, great answer. And and a great insight as well into the industry, because every golf course is different, and everyone manages and maintains differently, and clubs have different expectations. Members do. There's budgets, like you said, cultural and environmental factors. But for your side and the way that you do it there, which is most important, and I say that's in isolation and specific to you, because it doesn't work across even the Sandbelt. They're all different. So, mate, it very interesting. And I say POA to people, anyone who's golfer that's not sure, it's wintergrass. There's a common name. And I was really, you mentioned the POA Forum, and that's how I was down there in October, late October. I was really surprised, and I want to raise that profile a little bit to golfers, because golfers are members, and those golfers and members are the people that make up committees and boards that run golf clubs and manage golf clubs as well, and they manage the budgets. It's good to point that out, that we're now at a point, and it blew me away in Melbourne, that there are enough instances, that more than one, which is what I didn't know, of that resistance to herbicides. And it's not one. There's a number of instances where the POA grass, the winter grass, is resistant to all herbicides that are available in this country. And that blew my mind. So in terms of chemical control, it's not possible in some instances. Not all, but some. So the cultural practices that you maintain a golf course with, and you talked about that whether it's browning a golf course off, in a sense, in a dry springtime, and not watering, so that the cooch will take over and allow compete, and the natural decline from the POA will occur with the heat and dryness. These are all factors that go into maintaining the level of POA across the golf course, aren't they? These are important decisions and management practices that clubs need to understand, members and golfers understand, that when a golf course is I suppose let to dry out as part of presenting a playable golf course in a particular way, it's also there as a means of management for POA, for example, or different grass types along the way. So it's not just about playability, is it? There's other things in maintaining the golf course and maintaining the turf surfaces, isn't there?
It's a balance. I mean, there's a cause and effect. We're dealing with a living and breathing, environment, and I mean, there's a cause and effect. And I mean, even as such, you like to brown the turf off and keep it brown, but if you let it go too far backwards, then you'll open the turf surface up and the POA can jump in. So it really is a balance. And these are not dial settings that you sit in front of the computer and just turn them to a dial setting. I'll just like brown, but not too brown, so that the turf doesn't go backwards and the POA doesn't jump in. And I also like to put some water out, but I'm trying not to grow too much POA there and encourage POA, so I won't. These aren't dial settings. These are, decisions that turf managers across the country are making on a, more than a daily basis. And we're trying to balance all of those things: expectations, presentation, playability, all of those things. So, it's a challenge. Certainly, POA control is a real challenge. And
you make it sound like being a superintendent can be challenging at times, mate. I'm not so.
It can be. It's not all a walk in the park.
Dear. What do you mean it's not all glitz and glamour? Mate, no, look, I appreciate the insight, because I know that's very unique and specific to clubs all across the board and all across the country, let alone down in the Sandbelt as well. And like I said, I was really surprised that there are instances, and more than one. Like I say, there's plenty of instances where POA as a plant is resistant to chemical control. So you can go and put any of these chemicals out and it doesn't do anything. And that's really hard as a former superintendent for me to get my head around. I didn't deal with it because where we were, like I said, a kilometre in the sky in the Blue Mountains, very kind of similar to Melbourne weather in that it's drizzly and cloudy and overcast a lot of the time through summer, but we didn't get your heat. So for us, a max day was like 31 or 32. So it wouldn't be enough to sort of really push the POA back to a point of decline. It would just hang on. So that's why we didn't fight that fight. It was just a decision was made not to fight that fight. That was what we as a club were doing. So
and you still would have produced really good, fantastic turf surfaces, Steve, I'd imagine as well.
Oh, look,
despite that.
It's exactly. You find a way. I say you find a way. And you talked about the different growth rates at different times of the year with the two grasses. Yes, that's there. But ultimately you find a way to deliver as high a quality surface as you can, because that's your job. That's what you do. You always find a way. And at the end of the day, the majority, unless you're really pushing, and we weren't as high, I can say it was Katoomba Golf Club. It wasn't Royal Sydney. So the expectation, you go back, I think the root of a lot of problems in golf clubs, and I will say, you don't have to, mate, and you may or may not agree anyway, but I find the root of all problems in golf clubs is expectation, managing expectations from the membership and from golfers in general. Because if someone turns up and they expect a Royal Sydney or a Royal Melbourne when they turn up to Katoomba Golf Club, let me tell you what, you're going to be bitterly disappointed, people. It wasn't going to happen, right? But equally, it was only $45 for a round.
Yep.
But if you expect something else, expect Katoomba when you turned up to Katoomba, and I can use that that way of saying it, then you would probably be pleased with your experience. And I think getting that expectation management right and understanding, and I talked about before, understanding the goals of what the experience and the playability of the golf course is to be, you get that balance right and everyone has a good time. I think that's the other thing. So POA isn't necessarily always bad, because if you're accepting it, then you know what you're going to get.
Yep.
And it's not always bad. So
absolutely. I mean, we're so fortunate in Australia that we have, we have access to all of our golf courses. That we're not an American model where, there's most of the exclusive golf courses in America are really hard to get on. Golf is really accessible and affordable for people here. So the general golfing fraternity can play at Royal Melbourne, has access to be able to do that. So, there's a lot more exposure to that level of golf course. So, which probably they go there and then they go back to their home club and they expect the same. And golfers need to understand there's so much work that goes into a golf course, both from a labour perspective, both from a financial perspective, to get golf courses like Royal Sydney into the condition that they are. That's just not achievable at some of the smaller clubs. So, managing expectations is one of the biggest challenges. And even you look at somewhere like Augusta National. I mean, there's probably, I say every golf course has a budget. That's probably one that doesn't, I'd suggest. And they can throw as much money at a problem as they like, and they still have issues themselves. So, it's not always about throwing money at something. Sometimes you can't achieve what you're trying to achieve, and Mother Nature wins out, no matter what you do.
If she wants to push back, I haven't found anyone yet who can win.
She wins. Hands down every time.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. Mate, again, thanks for that little bit of insight into the idea of POA, and certainly for you guys at Metro. Mate, if you don't mind, and I know you know a bit about the history of Metropolitan, so I'd like to step into this historical bit if we can. And we'd talked about this when I visited. Can you tell us a little bit about the logo and the relationship, the logo of Metropolitan Golf Club and the relationship to Royal Melbourne? Because there is that early days, in its earliest times, they were a bit of a breakaway apart from one another, to for want of a better way of saying it. And I wanted to talk about the tree in the logo and what you showed me down there with the one that's aging and so on. Tell us about that.
So both clubs started off in Malvern, a suburb just to the east of the CBD in Melbourne. Started out as the Melbourne Golf Club, and suburbia, as it's done to the Sandbelt clubs, in this area as well. Suburbia started to encroach and started to chew up some of the golf course, and the surround. So in 1901, a portion of members from the original Melbourne Golf Club moved to Sandringham and started the Royal Melbourne Golf Club. And I actually can't remember when the Royal name was given to them, but so they started in 1901. They started out this Royal Melbourne Golf Club, and the people that hung on and watched suburbia encroach even further in Malvern then stayed for 5 years, and then in 1906 the remaining members purchased some farmland in Oakley South, which is now in 1908 they moved to the current home. So both clubs started off as the one club, the Melbourne Golf Club, and and then segregated in 1901, and then the Melbourne Golf Club was no longer in 1908 in Melbourne, and they ended up in Oakley. So we've, there's some really strong connections to Royal Melbourne Golf Club, and the Wings logo, the Metropolitan logo, the iconic Royal Melbourne logo is the Wings, and Metropolitan has that logo with our famous Physofolia or flowering gum in the centre of it on top of the golf ball. And I was actually doing a bit of reading about the logo some time ago, and the logo is actually a relatively new addition from the 1970s.
Okay.
With the Wings, and no doubt that was to pay homage to that Royal Melbourne connection. But so the logo's changed a little bit over time. But yeah, the 1970s was where that logo originated from. So both clubs started off as the same club and branched out, and here we are, 2023, two separate clubs, but with still really strong connections to each other. And talk about our famous flowering gum. I think it's 130 years old, probably the oldest Physofolia in Australia.
Jeez, really?
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
It's a big, beautiful grand tree. It's incredible.
It is. Unfortunately, I think she's seen her better days. She's certainly on the decline. She's senescing, but some of the pictures from 20, even 20, 30, 40 years ago, it was just an unbelievable looking tree. I'm not sure I've seen a more beautiful tree when it was flowering than that one. So that forms part of our logo, and obviously gives us a bit of a unique identity to the club here. Like I said, she's in senescence and probably doesn't have a great deal of time left, which is a real shame. But we do have one that was grown from seed just next to the current one. So hopefully she's going okay at the moment. So hopefully she'll take pride of place once the original one steps aside. So it's a bit of an insight into the club's logo and its history, I suppose, with and its connections to the Royal Melbourne Golf Club.
Absolutely, and I love that you showed me the sibling. Sibling? No, that's
yes.
not right. Yeah, sibling from seed. It was grown from seed. The tree that's planted next to the original one that's there, the old one, the aging one, and that in itself is a beautiful touch. That it was grown from seed. It wasn't just another plant. It's actually from that tree. That's beautiful. I love that.
And there's a number of them out in the golf course as well that have been grown, from that, and that being the parent tree. So, we still. Once she leaves us, we'll still have that strong connection.
Fantastic, mate. I've got a couple more questions, and hopefully won't take too much longer. But I don't know if this is a little bit cheeky to throw this one in or not. But you'll tell me otherwise. You'll tell me otherwise. One thing that stood out on my drive around with you, I think it's a 17th near the dam. There's four, five. Taxodiums, I think they are, swamp cypress.
Yep.
They really stood out for me, different in, I won't say in the way, and then we go back to quirk, and maybe it's a quirk, maybe it's not. I've not played the hole, so I don't know quite how it fits in the hole, but they really stood out, and you've talked about there's been work done over time, and those trees they're not 5 years old. They've been there for quite a while. I was just surprised, I suppose, if courses at the level of Metropolitan do vegetation management. Where do they fit, if that's the right way of saying it? Do they fit in the quirk category, or is that something that, maybe reassessed in time by the club? Is it always being assessed? They stood out to me as being a little bit different.
You've really put me on the spot here, Steve.
Mate, you don't need to answer if you don't want to. I'm okay with that.
I'm happy to answer. Let's put them in the quirk box for now. Some things on golf courses aren't ideal, but they've kind of always been there. And if you were starting again, you probably wouldn't plant them, but they're there, and I think they would have to. They'll fail first before we take them down.
Sure.
They do they're quite stark, aren't they? And
it really stood out like nothing. It's a quirk that wasn't, and because I love quirk, right? We've both got that in common that we like about golf courses, but it was a quirk that wasn't quite something that I thought, and by no means am I detracting from the place at all, but it was just one of those quirks that I thought in time, and like you said, in time, who knows? But I was just unsure as to where they was it part of the old, I don't know where it is as part of the old golf course. I got no clue. I was just curious.
It's part of the original, I think, golf course location, but obviously that's changed a lot with the construction of the lake that we have there as well. So
okay.
The 17th hole is probably a little bit compromised by our water storage in that regard. I think to me, they're stark in both their location and also in their look. You've mentioned, we have quite earthy tones here, and the indigenous vegetation, generally the indigenous vegetation of our site, gives us that earthy type appearance. Their colour and their texture probably don't quite fit as well as some of the other vegetation. So, but yeah, I think they're very much a hot topic at the club politically.
Shit! Have I put my foot in it? Sorry,
as you can well imagine.
I didn't mean to.
No, not at all. I mean, trees strike emotive feelings for people, and I totally understand that. I suppose when you're looking at a landscape from a fairly neutral perspective, you're talking about managing a landscape and managing things, and sometimes you can't let emotion get in the way of your decision making if it's for the better long term, the long term betterment of the property or what it may be. So, but I understand how golfers get very attached and very they strike some emotional feelings in people. Absolutely.
I'd heard, and that's fair. And look, I know, speak of the golf courses that I worked at, both Wentworth Falls in my early days and being super at Katoomba, there were branches that come out in the middle of fairways, and people would just be like, and I'd sit there and I'd go, that's got to go, people, that's got to go. And they're just like, no, that doesn't get touched. And I'm like, really? Okay, sure. And like you said, it does. And the other thing I want to make clear to people is just because you don't agree with it doesn't mean it doesn't need to be there. That's the other thing. It's got to be a collective decision.
Not at all. I mean, if you, exactly. It has to be what the club, what the club wants, and what they see is the right move. But I mean, I suppose if you look at the best, if you look at good golf or golf course architecture and what the experts say in that department, I haven't heard anybody say that those trees should stay from an architectural perspective, but I totally understand why the club would want to keep them as a quirk. So that's probably my fence-sitting answer there, Steve, I reckon. I don't think I've upset anybody.
I hope I haven't upset him. I said it initially when I said I'd say it cheeky, is because I have heard people mention it, and I thought nothing of it. Like, people I know who've played it, they go, oh, yeah, that's true. And I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. When I was there and we were just driving past, I went, holy shit, look at them. And that was just my reaction. Not having seen anything otherwise. So I just thought I'd ask the question because I wasn't sure where that might fit in time, and they are reasonably prominent. So, just hence to ask the question. Mate, I'm gonna finish on one, if you don't mind, and it probably goes back to, I've done a little bit of research, so I'm going to rattle some things off here. Mm-hmm. Some notable tournaments that Metropolitan Golf Club has hosted in the past. And I'll start off with the men's. It's hosted 7 Australian Opens, the last one being quite a while ago, back in 1997. It's hosted 5 Australian PGAs, and the last one being in 1968. It's also hosted the Australian Masters more recently in 2014 before it disappeared the year after, and that was once only for Metro. It's done the Women's Australian Open back in 2009 once. Laura Davies won it, the incredibly talented and amazing Laura Davies. It's also done the WGC Accenture Match Play back in 2001. These are some very, very high profile. It's always been on the radar of Australian Opens and things, but not recently, frustratingly for me, and I've talked about that a lot, that our biggest tournaments should move around from the men's and women's. Yep. Mate, will we see Metropolitan, in your mind, host another major tournament sometime in the near future? I feel a sense of loss and dismay that it's not been considered, and I know things are stitched up, and I talk about all that commercial crap. I'm not interested in it. For the love of the game,
yep,
will we see Metropolitan host another major tournament sometime soon? I'd love to see that. It has that. It oozes sexiness. How good is that on television, people? And challenging the best. What would it take, do you think?
I'd love to. I'd love to think so. That was part of the attraction for me coming to Metropolitan is, in my career, I haven't been a superintendent of a televised professional golf tournament. So that's something I'd like to tick off personally. But as a club, I mean, it's got a wonderfully storied history, as you mentioned, as a tournament venue. I think it only sits behind Royal Melbourne as the amount of times that it's held an Australian Open in Melbourne. I think it's fifth in the whole country. So, wonderfully storied history. Absolutely, I'd love to see an event here. I think it's really well regarded and by professionals, and I think the Sandbelters in general, isn't it? I mean, anytime you have a tournament on the Sandbelt, it's it's such a wonderful piece of golfing, a wonderful golfing area. But I'd love to see one at Metropolitan. What would it take, Steve? I mean, that's for people far above my pay grade that make those types of decisions. We're probably going to undertake a little bit of work in the next couple of years to improve certainly our greens and the way that they perform in the winter months particularly. So we might be off the probably speaking out of turn here, but it might be difficult for us to fit something in the next couple of years. But after that, there's no better way to showcase your changes to a golf course than hosting a major tournament again. So if there's any tournament organisers out there that are listening, absolutely, we'd love to host an event at Metropolitan. And I think everybody would love to get back to Metropolitan too as a tournament venue.
I agree, mate. I great to hear, and to be fair, the next few years are probably stitched up anyway, so you're probably not going to jump in the middle. But I think the Australian golf landscape laments the loss of a place like Metropolitan from being played on, and to have the men's Aussie Open played there last in '97. I mean, that's just striking. That when I read that, I was like, "What the hell?" I'm pretty sure that's correct. That's what I've dug up. So it would be, and of course the beautiful new clubhouse has got that incredible display when you walk through those doors on the left hand side of the history of tournaments being hosted at Metropolitan. I mean, there's so much built around tournament golf at Metropolitan. It's quite fascinating. I stood there when I was waiting to get a ride back, and I was just gleaning through the displays of all the wonderful memorabilia and the history, and it's the names and the faces and the photos and the trophies, and it's just it's really, it takes you back as well. You're probably easy to forget that Metropolitan has hosted so many tournaments.
I think the club celebrate it really well, and they're very proud of. We're very proud of our tournament history. I think as one of the preeminent golf clubs in the country, we have a responsibility as well to help grow the game by hosting, professional golf tournaments, but also elite amateur and other golfing events that promote and grow the game. And I know certainly at Royal Melbourne, they feel that responsibility really strongly, and we do here as well. We celebrate our tournament history, and members love being involved and love having tournaments and staging tournaments here. And like you said, you can see that in the breezeway and on the entrance to the locker room. We really celebrate. So we've got a long history of it, and long may that continue. And hopefully, one is just around the corner for us. Australian golf's probably having a little bit of a regeneration in terms of events and tournaments. I think a little bit in the past year. So long may that continue. And sponsorship dollars are so difficult, aren't they? I think that's
it's part of the problem, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. You need to attract people. Unfortunately, you need money, and for money you need sponsors, and that's a bit of a chicken and egg type situation there. But as a club, we would love to host a tournament in the not too distant future.
Well, I can speak for myself and say that I'd love to hear that Metropolitan gets a start at one of the largest tournaments of the country. Would be fascinating to hear, and I think it would get a lot of people, a lot of tongues wagging to see it come back to Metropolitan, to any of those to come back to Metropolitan. What a way! I'm going to throw it out there. Look, I love throwing stupid things out. Wouldn't it be awesome? Wouldn't it be awesome to see the revival of the Australian Masters come back to Metropolitan? I'm just throwing it out there. I think
it would. I mean, it'd be great to have an event. I love the Sandbelt. I think there's, it's one of the few unique, golfing venues in the world that has such a, high quality of golf courses and the way that they're presented. It's really is unique. So, having a golf tournament of a high, with good fields and of a high level and a high stature rotating around the Sandbelt would be phenomenal. I mean, to stage, some wonderful golf courses there and putting them on show, as we saw at the Australian Open this year with Victoria and Kingston Heath. They're just fantastic golf courses. So it'd be great to get the Masters back and just have that on a little bit of rotation around the Sandbelt. That would be magical.
Saliva dripping out of my mouth at the thought.
So, fingers crossed.
Mate, that would be incredible. John Mann, Superintendent of Metropolitan Golf Club in Melbourne, thank you so much for your time, your generous time, and being so open and honest about all sorts of different things that we chatted about, mate. Appreciate your time, picking your brains, and some wonderful answers. So thank you for being part of Keeper of the Greens on the Golfing Greenkeeper podcast, mate. It's been wonderful chatting to you, and I really thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Hopefully I've provided a little bit of insight to people out there as well about what our challenges are and what's happening in the industry. So thanks for giving the opportunity, Steve.
Well, what did you think of that one? What a great conversation with Superintendent of Metropolitan Golf Club, John Mann. Thank you, John. And look, what an intelligent conversation. John is an intelligent man, and that was a wonderful conversation. We both really enjoyed it, had a great time doing it, and what a wonderful insight. And I keep saying all these things because it's a high-profile golf club. Not a lot of people know a lot of the detail and the ins and outs of what goes on behind the scenes to make such a wonderful golf course and looking after and bringing out the character and such history of a golf club. There's a lot in there, and John was, hopefully you got a lot of insight out of that. I had a wonderful chat, and I know John enjoyed it too. We both had a wonderful time doing it. So thank you to John. And look, guys, really think about those bits and pieces of the conversations and think about some of the points that we brought up, even the things that are power-related stuff that was maybe not so relevant to Metropolitan, but I wanted to get an insight from a Melbourne superintendent just to some of the things that are borderline that are going to be looking into being things to think about in the future for some of these golf clubs as well. There's a lot there to digest, and I hope you enjoyed listening to that one. It was a great conversation. So really, really hope you guys were able to get as much out of it as I certainly did. So look, guys, please like, share, subscribe. I throw it out there, and I would love a review. I'm always looking for reviews. It helps share the podcast around. So at the moment, with the few number of podcasts I've done this year for 2023, I'm excited to bring you more, and I've got a lot boiling in the background. It's just going to take me a bit of time to hopefully get a bit of drive happening, get a bit of momentum as the young fella gets a little bit better as well, so we can put some more things together and really start to wind the podcast up again for 2023 and bring you a lot more. So, guys, stick with me. Please like, share, subscribe. As I say, reviews are fantastic, so please get on there onto Spotify and onto Apple on their platforms and write some reviews for me. Leave some star ratings. I appreciate it. 5 stars. Yep, 5 stars is good. But look, wonderful. Thank you very much for joining me. As always, I will leave you with "You hit 'em clean, we'll keep 'em green," and I'll catch up with you very soon.